Chapter 31. It bothered Fraser that there was so little evidence to link Claire to Anna. Nothing but her instinct and an interpretation of what Claire had said up by the Devil's Chair the night before. Any decent defence barrister, even a sloppy one for that matter, would make mincemeat of that in seconds. And Claire's legal team would not be sloppy. Not only was her father a judge, her mum was a KC, as were two of her uncles. While her aching head might not agree, Fraser was glad that Claire had assaulted her in front of witnesses. They had incontrovertible grounds to hold her, for a few more hours at least. While Fraser and Chowdhury had been with John Davis, Pitbull had had the team going through every bit of evidence to find proof of a relationship between Claire and Anna. Lucy Hawkins' death was back under the spotlight too. Anyone at the bunkhouse would have had access to the barn where she had been found. Claire, tall and strong, would have had no difficulty rigging up the pulley that had been used to haul Lucy up to the beam. Or no more difficulty than John Davis at any rate. This was her second summer at the bunkhouse. She would have known where to find anything she needed, been familiar with the kit stored in the barn, and several witnesses had told how Lucy had confided in Claire that she had seen something on the day of Anna's death. Whereas Russell and John Davis had assumed that she'd been referring to having seen Joe Ingalls out and about at night, Marianne and Riley had cast a different light on it. Marianne had said that Lucy had seemed uncomfortable when Claire had taken her under her wing that day she'd been crying, had been keen to steer clear of the game of cricket. Riley had been even more specific. It had been like Lucy was trying to tell Claire something, but she didn't want any of the others to know. He'd thought she suspected Davis, who'd been hanging around Claire. And if Lucy had suspected Claire, it would at least explain her distress, her reluctance to mention it to the police. Lucy and Claire had been friendly. Maybe Claire had suggested they go for a walk together to talk it over, though why it had had to be at night would have taken some creative thinking. However she'd managed it, Claire had had time to plan Lucy's death and executed it mercilessly. In the end, it was Corby who found the link, just after Fraser and Chowdhury finished their interview with Davis. Tasked with going through Anna's phone records again, she had noticed repeated calls to a number, many of which had gone unanswered in the months before her death. On the afternoon that Anna disappeared, she had called the number about 15 minutes after the sales assistant at the Stiperstones village shop had seen the red Fiesta. Around 5 minutes after John Davis must have parked the same red Fiesta in the lay-by near Lower Farm. It had seemed logical to assume that the person she had called had been her killer, but the number did not belong to any of the witnesses in the case. They had even checked Mona Bell Brigham, the head teacher, along with Anna's friend Sally Parker and the other teachers at Church Stretton Primary. In dogged desperation, Corby had gone through the numbers belonging to the bunkhouse guests once more. Again, there were no matches, but when she looked closely at the number given by Claire Ursid, it differed from Anna's mystery contact by only 2 digits. Claire had been required to surrender her phone when she had been arrested, and it had been a simple matter for Corby to request it from the duty sergeant and dial the number on Anna's records. Bingo. Claire's phone, still full of charge, had rung. Even Pitbull was excited enough to look like he might turn cartwheels.
"It's not enough to nail her, but it's a start. Right," he said to the team. "While D.I. Fraser and I have a little chat with our pink dreadlocked friend, I want you lot all over her emails and phone records. Back as far as last summer. Get it onto tech. I want a chart showing the course of their relationship, whether it was friendship or something more. If we can prove sustained contact following their meeting last summer, we're on to something." "Now, I know you think they were having an affair," Pitbull said to Fraser as they made their way to the interview room, "but I want you to pedal softly on that one, you hear? I'm not having that silk-suited solicitor complaining we're accusing her of being a lesbian."
"You make it sound as though being gay is a crime, sir."
"Don't be daft," Pitbull said, "but Daddy the judge won't be keen on that line of questioning, will he?"
"For all we know, sir, both Claire and her parents are fine with her being gay. It's hardly a taboo these days."
"Yeah, well, go easy, okay? We need to get this right. I don't mind your taking the lead since you seem to have worked it out, but expect me to jump in if you go off-piste."
A trustafarian. That was what Marianne had said Donald called Claire. No actual need for paid work, which was a significant benefit where you were a budding field archaeologist. Despite the dishevelment of a night in the cells, you could see the wealth in her bones. Her pink hair, which showed natural blonde at the roots, was swept up in a top knot of dreadlocks, and she wore the usual tie-dye top and baggy cardigan, but somehow still looked expensively dressed. Was it all a rebellion against a traditional family, brought up by two high-achieving lawyers, rejecting the system? Fraser imagined she was glad of that system now. Her solicitor was like something from an American legal drama, all shining gamine hair and fitted designer suit. "Annalise Swainton," the solicitor said, standing and holding out a hand when Fraser and Pitbull entered the interview room. Her handshake was firm and cool. Pitbull's greeting was gruff, almost dismissive, so the war of attrition was off to a good start, and he busied himself with switching on the camera, explaining why the interview would be recorded, seeing to all the formalities, and leaving Miss Swainton no opportunity to take control of the proceedings.
"You'll see that Detective Inspector Fraser's injured, Claire," Pitbull said as he sat. "Would you be able to explain how that happened?"
Claire sat silent and stony, her eyes blank. "As my client has explained," said the solicitor, "it was a case of mistaken identity, and there was no intent to cause harm. In the darkness, she mistook the inspector for someone who intended to harm her friend, a Mr. John Davis. A Joe Ingalls, I believe. She thought she was coming to her friend's rescue." Pitbull nodded and made a face as if weighing her words.
"Actually, she hasn't explained anything. From the time she was brought down from the hill after assaulting an officer and trying to fling herself off a rock tower, she refused to speak at all. So your explanation's the first we've had. Anyway, Claire," he said, turning to the young woman with a brief smile, "as you can see, D.I. Fraser's doing fine. Some impressive stitches under that bandage, and a mild concussion, few broken ribs, plenty of bruises, but she'll live to fight another day."
Claire's eyes flickered briefly over Fraser, but held no discernible expression. "I wanted to ask you, Claire," Fraser said, "why were you up at the Devil's Chair last night? There have been 2 murders in this vicinity, one at the bunkhouse, and you've all been warned to take care. Yeah, you went up on the hill in the dark on your own." The cool eyes held Fraser's for a moment, as though Claire was considering whether to pay her the compliment of answering. Then she sighed. "I went to meet John, Martin as he was. It was supposed to be an adventure, a laugh." She shot a look at the solicitor under her lashes. "Sex at the Devil's Chair. Something to burn off the sheer hell and tension of the past week. Make us feel young and carefree." Fraser nodded. "And how long have you known about Martin being John? About his being Anna Price's foster brother?" It was easy, given Claire's apparent lack of recollection of the previous night, to ignore it and behave as though she was a witness rather than someone who had already been charged with murder. If that was how Claire chose to play it, then it suited Fraser fine. "He told me a few days ago, shaken up when he suspected his roommate might be the killer. He needed someone to confide in. Can I smoke?" She looked at Annalise Swainton rather than at either of the officers, though it was Fraser who answered. "I'm afraid not. The whole building is no smoking these days," Fraser said. "The 2 of you had hit it off, that was obvious. You said you were meeting for sex. Had you begun a relationship?" Claire laughed. "Our generation is a little different. We don't have to pretend to fall in love first." "I thought John seemed pretty smitten with you," Fraser said. "I think John's the type who probably needs to think he's in love." She exhaled as though smoking the forbidden cigarette. "Needy. He was after comfort. His foster sister had just died." "His foster sister was murdered?" Fraser said. Claire held her eyes and leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You know, I have to say, I thought it was really weird. Him turning up here after she disappeared and pretending not to know anything about her. Very sus. You'd have to be a bit emotionally fucked up to keep up the pretense once you'd found out she'd been murdered." "What do you mean by sus?" "Suspicious, of course. Don't say you don't agree with me. I reckon he most likely killed Anna by accident and then cooked up the whole turning up at the bunkhouse as a cover story." Since Sally Parker had first planted the seed in Fraser's mind, she had found Claire intriguing. She was becoming more so as the interview went on. Surely she couldn't have forgotten her behaviour at the Devil's Chair. Her accusations of John Davis, her assertion that he would have been found dead on the rocks with a suicide note in his hand. Not that he would commit suicide, Fraser had noticed, but that was how he would be found once Claire had finished with him.
"Tell me about your friendship with Anna,"
Fraser said. "What about it?" "Is that relevant to a charge of assaulting a police officer?" the solicitor said. Pitbull answered with a growl.
"No, but as you're aware, we've also charged your client with the murders of Anna Price and Lucy Hawkins."
"Of which she has declared herself innocent."
"And this is her chance to exonerate herself," Pitbull said. "The more open she is in answering D.I. Fraser's questions, the better her chances."
His tone was so straightforward that Fraser wondered for a moment if the DCI still did not buy Claire as the killer. She hoped she was wrong, and that there would soon be some forensic evidence to back up her theory. Swainton waved a hand as though giving Fraser permission to continue.
"So," Fraser said, "tell me about Anna."
Claire shrugged. "We became friends, I suppose, after I helped her with that club at her school."
"And I understand she volunteered up on the dig at Bodbury Ring last year. Did you see her then over the summer?"
"A bit. Riley was up at Bodbury. Donald lets us swap sometimes. I did a few days up there." She uttered every word in a cool, disinterested tone. Casual. Mention of a passing acquaintance.
"And you stayed in touch?"
Fraser asked. "What makes you think that?"
"Email records, phone records."
Fraser hoped to God that someone on the team had found evidence to back up her assertions.
"It's hard to hide your tracks these days."
Claire looked at Annalise Swainton, who nodded. "Yeah, we stayed in touch. She was all right. I liked her." She was a bore who couldn't take no for an answer. The words, screamed over a quartzite boulder field, rang in Fraser's ears. Pitbull stirred in his seat, tucked his tie down over his belly.
"So, why didn't you tell D.I. Fraser this when she came asking about Anna, after her body was found?"
"How was I supposed to know it was her? That photo you showed round was horrendous. Nothing like her."
"But after she was identified," Fraser said, "when I came up to the dig that day and spoke to you and Wiltshire Sam, you could have told me then."
"And get myself mixed up in a murder investigation," Claire said. "Do you think I'm an idiot?" No, Fraser thought. Not an idiot at all. Clever and cold, and possibly a sociopath. A psychopath even. "Anyway," Claire said, "I wouldn't have been able to tell you anything useful, so what was the point?"
"You liked her. She was a friend. Surely you'd want to help us find out who harmed her."
Claire shrugged. "Like I said, I didn't want to get involved. With a family like mine, you have to be careful not to attract attention. The press has ears everywhere." It was true. Speculation in the papers had become progressively wilder as the days since Anna and then Lucy's death had passed. The team at least was watertight. There had been no leaks, but the rumour mill was churning all over social media. Fraser wondered if Marianne would even have a business left at the end. Except for Roger Taylor and the archaeologists, all upcoming bookings had been cancelled. Fraser felt as though she were playing chess against a grand master. Claire displayed not an ounce of vulnerability. A mistake on her part, perhaps. Someone genuinely innocent, especially one so young, might have been tearful, desperate to prove their innocence. Unless the contempt she displayed was simply part of that upper-class veneer Fraser had noticed in her university days and since. The unshakable self-belief of the wealthy and privileged.
"Do you know anything about Anna's boyfriend?" Fraser asked. "An archaeologist, apparently. She met him last summer, according to her friends. Fell head over heels in love."
"How would I know?"
"You spent time with her last summer. You knew the team up at Bodbury. Your friend Riley was there. Wouldn't you have known if Anna was seeing someone?"
A strange, pinched expression crossed Claire's face. Why would I have cared if she was seeing anyone? It was Fraser's turn to shrug. She smiled at Claire.
Are you surprised to hear she had a boyfriend?
A raised eyebrow with a hint of belligerence was the only response. Fraser took it as encouragement that she was nearing a mark.
Did you ever suspect that Anna was gay?
Silence. Annalise Swainton made a note in the leather-bound book on the table in front of her.
Did you suspect Anna was a lesbian?
Claire's face twisted. I suppose you think you're the expert on lesbians, do you? She said. You probably even call yourself one, although you are in fact a biological man, so it's not possible. You know Marianne Leonard is, of course. Fraser smiled again.
I don't think either my or Marianne's sexuality is relevant here, Claire. I would like to know if you knew about Anna's.
You know, Marianne wouldn't even look at you twice if she wasn't trying to keep her precious bunkhouse out of the news. She is an lesbian, not interested in anything with a penis, which rules you out. I'm not sure this line of questioning is helpful, the solicitor said.
I disagree,
Fraser said, shooting a look across at Pitbull. He rubbed a hand over his belly and nodded for her to continue.
Claire, did Anna call you on the afternoon that she died?
The Grand Master took a second to consider her next move. Fraser could almost see the synapses firing in her cranium. Again she looked at her solicitor. My client is aware, the woman said, that you have access to phone records, and that therefore you know Anna called her that afternoon. A phone call, however, is not proof of murder. You'll need something more substantial if you wish to hold my client for much longer.
What was the call about, Claire?
I don't know. I didn't pick up. Which of course I regret now that she's dead.
The call lasted for about 3 minutes.
The young woman barely skipped a beat. Voicemail. She left a message.
About?
Claire shrugged. I couldn't make it out. Poor signal or whatever. Just lots of white noise and her sounding hysterical. Fraser nodded.
So why didn't you tell us?
I told you I didn't want to get involved. A knock on the door fractured the tension in the small room. Pitbull motioned for Fraser to stay seated and heaved himself out of his chair. Fraser watched the loaded glances exchanged between Annalise Swainton and her client. After her burst of anger, Claire seemed to have regained her cool detachment. From outside, Fraser heard Chowdhury's voice.
Thought you want to see this, Gov? And I reckon D.R. Fraser's going to want this too.
Pitbull came back in, tucked in his shirt tails and suspended the interview, switching off the camera.
We'll send you in some tea while we take a quick break,
he said. Then before the solicitor could object, reminded her it was in her client's best interest for them to examine all evidence as thoroughly as possible.
After all, might be this gets her off, mightn't it? You wouldn't want us to miss anything.
Outside the interview room, Chowdhury handed a file to Pitbull.
Forensics, he said. Analysis of those caving suits at the bunkhouse. One had DNA from Lucy Hawkins on the outside and Claire Ursid on the inside. Gotcha, he said.
Possibly, said Pitbull. Not incontrovertible. Lucy might have handled the suit. That tailor bloke said she enjoyed tidying the kit store.
Oh, come on, Gov.
I tell you, that brief won't let us get away with anything. What have you got for the DI?
Fraser's head was aching badly, and she wondered when she'd last taken any painkillers. If there'd been a bed anywhere in the vicinity, she'd have begged to lie down.
This'll pep you up, boss,
Chowdhury said, handing her a sheaf of printouts.
Love letters, or love emails anyway. All the evidence of relationship you could want.
A rush of adrenaline chased away the fatigue in an instant.
Going back how far?
Last June, until April. Then it looks like Ursid ghosted her.